Everyone said I'd fall apart when my billionaire fiancé chose his innocent secretary over me. They were wrong. I didn't cry, didn't beg, didn't even pack my bags. I just disappeared. 3 months later, he's on his knees outside my penthouse, sobbing like a child, while his precious secretary is in handcuffs. Want to know how a single text message destroyed his entire empire? Buckle up because this story gets wild. Let me take you back to when I thought I had it all figured out. My name is Alexandra Sterling, and at 28 I was already running Sterling Marketing Solutions, the most sought-after digital marketing empire on the West Coast. We didn't just create campaigns, we built legacies. Fortune 500 companies fought over our consultation slots, and I had a waiting list longer than most people's grocery receipts. Marcus Chin was supposed to be my perfect match. Harvard MBA, investment banker with Goldman Sachs, and the kind of smile that could close million-dollar deals before dessert arrived. We met at a charity auction where I outbid him for a weekend in Napa, and instead of being intimidated, he asked me to split the prize with him. 3 years of what everyone called the power couple goals, and 6 months ago he proposed with a ring that made my assistant Sarah actually gasp out loud. The proposal was perfect, naturally. Marcus had rented out the entire top floor of the Meridian, filled it with white roses and string lights, and somehow convinced my favorite violinist to play while he got down on one knee. I said yes because it felt like the logical next step for two successful people who complemented each other beautifully in public and had amazing chemistry in private. That should have been my first red flag, thinking of marriage as a logical step instead of an emotional leap. Enter Lily Morrison, or as she preferred to be called, just Lily, like the flower. Marcus hired her as his executive assistant about 4 months after our engagement, and I'll admit, my first thought was that she looked like she'd stepped out of a romantic comedy. Petite, doe-eyed, with this breathless way of speaking that made every sentence sound like she was sharing a delicious secret. She had honey blonde hair that always seemed to catch the light perfectly and a wardrobe that walked the fine line between professional and accidentally seductive. She's incredibly efficient, Marcus told me over dinner one night, scrolling through his phone while cutting his steak. Organized my entire calendar system, negotiated better rates with 3 vendors, and somehow made my coffee taste better. I don't know how I managed without her. I should have paid more attention to the way his eyes lit up when he talked about his assistant's organizational skills. But I was busy closing a deal with a tech startup that would add 7 figures to my revenue, so I just smiled and made some comment about how great it was that he finally had proper support. The changes started small. Marcus began working later, claiming that Lily stayed after hours to help him catch up on backlogged projects. He started canceling our Saturday morning runs because Lily discovered this amazing breakfast place near the office, and we're going to discuss the Morrison account over Eggs Benedict. When I suggested joining them, he'd get this slightly panicked look and explain that it would be more efficient with just the 2 of them since I didn't know the client details. I noticed he started taking calls in another room, speaking in lower tones that he claimed were about sensitive client matters. His laptop, which used to lie open on our kitchen counter, suddenly required passwords I didn't know. When I teased him about becoming secretive, he laughed it off and said Goldman had implemented new security protocols. "You're being paranoid, Alex," my best friend Sarah warned me over cocktails one evening. "Marcus isn't the cheating type. He's too methodical. Besides, have you seen how he looks at you? The man is completely gone for you." Maybe that's why I dismissed the gut feeling that had started gnawing at me. Marcus had never given me reason to doubt him. He still brought me coffee every morning, still kissed me goodbye with genuine warmth, still talked about our wedding plans with enthusiasm. When he looked at me, I saw the same appreciation that had been there since our first date. But then there were the little things that didn't quite add up. Like how Lily somehow knew Marcus's coffee preferences better than the barista at his regular shop. Or how she'd started wearing a perfume that lingered in his car. Or the way Marcus's phone would buzz with messages at midnight, messages he'd glance at and then quickly dismiss as work emergencies. The breaking point came on a Tuesday that started like any other. I was in my office, reviewing campaign analytics for our biggest client, when my phone rang with a call from David Martinez, CEO of Technova Industries. David was one of those clients who'd become a friend over the years, and his company represented nearly 15% of my annual revenue. Alex, I need to ask you something, and I want you to know this is coming from a place of respect. David's voice was careful, controlled. Did you give another agency access to the strategy proposal you presented to us last month? My blood went cold. Absolutely not. That proposal was marked confidential for Technova exclusively. Why? Because I just received an almost identical pitch from a startup called Bloom Digital. Same market analysis, same demographic targeting, same creative direction. The only difference is they're offering it for 60% of your quoted price. The room started spinning. I knew that proposal by heart. I'd spent 3 weeks developing the strategy, analyzing market data, creating projections. It was innovative, specific, and completely original. There was no way another agency could have developed something so similar unless they'd had access to my work. David, can you send me their proposal? I need to see exactly what we're dealing with. Already in your inbox, Alex. And Alex, the founder of Bloom Digital, listed Marcus Chin as one of their primary financial advisors. I thought you should know. I hung up and opened my email with hands that had started to shake. The proposal that filled my screen was my work, restructured just enough to avoid obvious plagiarism but unmistakably based on my research, my insights, my strategy. At the bottom of the document, in elegant script, was the signature, Lily Morrison, founder and creative director, Bloom Digital. Marcus had given my confidential work to his secretary. His innocent, efficient, doe-eyed secretary had used my intellectual property to launch a competing business. And she was using my own fiancé as her financial advisor. I sat in my office for exactly 10 minutes, staring at that proposal, waiting for the tears or rage or heartbreak to hit. Instead, what I felt was something much more dangerous. Cold, calculating clarity. Marcus hadn't just betrayed our relationship. He'd betrayed my trust, my business, and my professional reputation. This wasn't just personal anymore. It was war. And if there was one thing Alexandra Sterling had never done in her entire life, it was lose a war. I picked up my phone and made the first call that would change everything. I called my lawyer first. Not to cry or vent, but to ask a very specific question. Rebecca, if someone uses my confidential business proposals to start a competing company, what are my legal options? Rebecca Martinez had been my attorney since I'd started my business, and she knew better than to ask emotional questions when I used that particular tone. Intellectual property theft, breach of fiduciary duty if they had authorized access, potential criminal charges depending on how they obtained the information. Alex, what's going on? I'll send you everything in an hour. I need you to document this properly and tell me exactly how much legal trouble someone could be in. I hung up before she could ask follow-up questions. My second call was to my accountant. Jim, I need a complete audit of every shared account, investment, and asset I have with Marcus. I want to know exactly what's mine, what's his, and what we own together. I need this information by tomorrow morning. Is everything okay, Alex? This sounds like I'm preparing for war? You're absolutely right. How quickly can you liquidate my portion of our joint investments without his signature? There was a pause. Legally, 48 hours for most of them. Alex, are you sure you want to? I'm sure. Start the process. My third call was to David Martinez. David, I'm going to ask you a favor and I need you to trust me completely. Can you stall your decision on the Bloom Digital proposal for 1 week? Tell them you're waiting for board approval or something. Of course, but Alex, what are you planning? Justice. And when this is over, I'll offer you the same campaign strategy for free, plus a custom expansion plan that'll make their stolen version look like amateur hour. I spent the rest of Tuesday afternoon in what I privately called strategic preparation mode. I'd learned this approach from my father, who'd built his own empire from nothing by always staying 3 moves ahead of his competition. The key was to prepare for every possible outcome before your opponent even realized the game had started. By Wednesday morning I had a complete picture. Marcus and I owned the penthouse together, but I could buy him out immediately thanks to a clause I'd insisted on during purchase. Our investment portfolio was structured so that I could withdraw my portions without his consent. Something I'd set up years ago after watching a friend get financially trapped in a bad relationship. The joint business account that Marcus had access to contained exactly $50,000. Everything else was in accounts he'd never even seen. I'd also discovered something interesting. Bloom Digital had been incorporated 6 weeks ago, right around the time Marcus started working late with Lily. The address listed for their business? An executive suite rental 3 blocks from Marcus's office. Their business loan application, which Jim's connections had helped me obtain, listed Marcus as both a financial advisor and personal reference. Thursday morning, I did something I'd never done in my adult life. I called in sick to work. Instead, I spent the day apartment hunting. Not just any apartment. I wanted something that would make a statement. By noon, I'd put down a deposit on a penthouse across town that made our current place look modest. The view was spectacular, the building was exclusive, and most importantly, Marcus had no idea it existed. Friday afternoon, I made my move. I scheduled a routine meeting with Marcus for Saturday morning under the pretense of discussing our wedding venue deposit. But first, I had one more call to make. Sarah, I said when my best friend picked up, I need you to do something for me, and I need you to ask 0 questions until Monday. Okay, now I'm scared. What's going on? Tomorrow at noon, I need you to come to the penthouse with that big Louis Vuitton suitcase you never use. I'm going to pack exactly 1 bag of clothes in my jewelry box. Everything else stays exactly where it is. Alex, you're freaking me out. Are you leaving Marcus? I'm not leaving him, Sarah. I'm vanishing. There's a difference. Saturday morning arrived with the kind of crisp October weather that usually made me optimistic about everything. Marcus was in the kitchen making coffee when I walked in, wearing jeans and one of his old Columbia sweatshirts. He looked so familiar, so comfortable that for a split second I almost doubted my plan. Morning, beautiful, he said, handing me a mug. Ready to go look at the country club? I think you're going to love what they've done with the ballroom. I took the coffee and smiled at him over the rim. Actually, Marcus, I need to tell you something first. He settled against the counter, giving me his full attention in that focused way that had first attracted me to him. What's on your mind? I know about Lily's company. I know you gave her my Technova proposal. I know you've been helping her steal my clients. The coffee mug slipped from his hands, shattering against the marble floor. His face went through a series of expressions: shock, panic, guilt, and then something that looked almost like relief. Alex, I can explain. I'm sure you can. But here's the thing, Marcus. I don't want your explanation. I don't want your apology. I don't want anything from you at all anymore. I walked past him toward the bedroom, stepping carefully around the broken ceramic. Sarah will be here in an hour to help me collect a few things. You can keep everything else. What do you mean, keep everything? Alex, where are you going? We need to talk about this. I turned back to look at him one last time, this man I'd planned to marry, standing in our kitchen with coffee dripping down the cabinets and panic written across his face. Marcus, you chose Lily over me the moment you decided to help her steal my work. So now you get to have Lily and all the consequences that come with her. I hope she's worth it. I left him standing there and went to pack my bag. In exactly 60 minutes I would walk out of this life forever. And I had never felt more powerful in my entire life. Sarah arrived at exactly noon, carrying the suitcase and wearing the expression of someone who'd spent the morning Googling how to help your best friend have a complete breakdown. She found me in the walk-in closet, methodically folding designer suits into neat piles. Okay, I've been patient for exactly 12 hours, she announced, setting the suitcase on the bed. But if you don't tell me what's happening right now, I'm staging an intervention. I held up the black Armani dress I'd worn to Marcus's company Christmas party. Do you remember what you said when I wore this? That I looked like I could run the world and look stunning doing it. Alex, you're scaring me with the past tense talk. You were right. I can run the world. I just forgot that for a while. I folded the dress carefully and placed it in the suitcase. Marcus has been helping his secretary steal my business strategies to start her own company. They've been planning this for months. Sarah's mouth fell open. That little blonde thing? The one who looks like she couldn't organize a grocery list. Turns out she's very good at organizing. Just not in the way Marcus thought. I moved to the jewelry box, selecting only the pieces I'd bought myself. The engagement ring stayed on the dresser, catching afternoon light like it was mocking me. So what's the plan? Are we destroying his car? Posting his secrets on social media? Please tell me we're doing something dramatic. I closed the suitcase and smiled at her. We're doing something much worse. We're letting him realize what he's lost all by himself. While Sarah loaded my bag into her car, I walked through the penthouse one final time. Everything looked exactly the same. The Italian leather sofa we'd picked out together, the abstract painting Marcus had bought me for my birthday, the kitchen where we'd cooked dinner every Sunday for 3 years. But it felt like someone else's life now, like I was touring a museum exhibit of my former self. Marcus was sitting at the dining table with his laptop open, frantically typing. He looked up when I entered, his hair disheveled and his usually perfect shirt wrinkled. Alex, please. Just give me 5 minutes to explain. Lily's father is sick, she needed money for his treatment, I was just trying to help. Marcus. My voice was so calm it surprised even me. Do you remember what you said when you proposed? He blinked, confused by the change in direction. I said I wanted to build a life with you. That you were the strongest, most brilliant woman I'd ever met. You were right about one thing. I am strong. And brilliant women don't waste time on men who mistake kindness for weakness. I pulled out my phone and placed it on the table between us. This is the last time we'll speak. After I leave, any communication goes through lawyers. Lawyers? Alex, you're being dramatic. We can work this out, go to counseling, take a break. I leaned forward slightly and something in my expression made him stop talking. Marcus, you gave confidential information from my company to another woman so she could compete against me. That's not a relationship problem. That's corporate espionage. And the brilliant woman you fell in love with? She doesn't forgive betrayal. I stood and walked toward the door, then paused. Oh, and Marcus? You might want to ask Lily exactly how she knew which proposals to steal. Because I'm betting she's been much more thorough in her research than you realize. The look of confusion that crossed his face told me everything I needed to know. He still had no idea how deep this betrayal ran. Sarah was waiting by the elevator, practically vibrating with curiosity. Please tell me you said something devastatingly cool. I told him the truth. Sometimes that's the most devastating thing of all. As the elevator descended, I felt something I hadn't expected. Relief. Not the sharp satisfaction of revenge, but the deep, clean feeling of finally putting down a weight I hadn't realized I'd been carrying. My new penthouse was everything the old one wasn't. Modern instead of classic, minimalist instead of cozy, and completely, entirely mine. The floor-to-ceiling windows offered a view of the city that made me feel like I was floating above all the chaos below. This place is incredible, Sarah said, spinning around in the empty living room. When did you even have time to find it? I've been looking at backup plans for longer than I care to admit. I set my purse on the kitchen counter and pulled out my phone. My father always said that smart people prepare for disaster even when everything seems perfect. Your father is a wise man. So what now? Do we order champagne and plot revenge? I scrolled through my contacts and found the number I needed. Now I make one phone call, and then we order Thai food and watch Marcus's world implode from a safe distance. The phone rang twice before a familiar voice answered. Rebecca Martinez's office. Rebecca, it's Alex. I'm ready to move forward with everything we discussed. And I have additional information about criminal activities that I think you'll find very interesting. Sarah's eyes went wide. Criminal activities? I mouthed later and continued. I want you to file everything on Monday morning. The intellectual property theft, the breach of contract, and I want a forensic accountant to examine every transaction Marcus made in the last 6 months. Alex, this is going to be expensive and public. Are you sure you want to? Rebecca, I've never been more sure of anything in my life. Oh, and one more thing. When you serve the papers, I want them delivered to his office. In front of his colleagues. Professional betrayal deserves a professional response. I hung up and found Sarah staring at me like she'd never seen me before. Alex Sterling, she said slowly, you've been planning this since the beginning, haven't you? I smiled and opened the takeout app on my phone. Sarah, I've been preparing for this possibility since the day I started my business. I just never thought I'd need to use it against someone I loved. And now I'm going to destroy him so completely that he'll spend the rest of his life wishing he'd chosen differently. The Thai food arrived just as my phone started buzzing with the first wave of calls. Marcus, naturally, but also 3 unknown numbers that I suspected were Lily trying to reach me from different phones. I let them all go to voicemail while Sarah and I spread pad thai and green curry across my new granite countertops. "Aren't you going to listen to the messages?" Sarah asked, eyeing my silenced phone like it might explode. "Why? I already know what they're going to say. Marcus will be confused and desperate, making promises he should have made months ago. Lily will try to convince me this is all a misunderstanding, probably with tears." I opened a container of spring rolls and inhaled the familiar comfort of lemongrass and mint. Let them panic. Panic makes people sloppy. As if on cue, my phone lit up with a text from Marcus. "Alex, please call me back. There are things you don't understand about Lily's situation. I was trying to protect you from getting involved in something complicated." Sarah read over my shoulder and snorted. "Protect you? By stealing your work and giving it to his side piece. The beautiful thing about men like Marcus," I said, taking a bite of pad thai, "is that they always think they're the smartest person in the room. Right up until they realize they're not." My phone buzzed again. This time it was a call from an unknown number, but I recognized the slightly breathless voice that came through when I finally answered. "Alex, thank God. This is Lily. I think there's been a terrible misunderstanding." "Lily Morrison of Bloom Digital," I interrupted pleasantly. "How lovely to hear from you directly. I was wondering when you'd call." There was a pause, and when she spoke again, the breathless, innocent act had dropped considerably. "Look, I don't know what Marcus told you, but—" "Marcus didn't tell me anything, sweetie. I found out about your little business venture from one of your potential clients. You know, the ones you're trying to steal using my work. It's not stealing if the ideas are improved and—" "Lily, let me save you some time. I've already spoken to my lawyers. Intellectual property theft is a felony when the value exceeds $50,000. Your proposal to Technova was based on research that cost me over $200,000 to develop." I kept my voice conversational like we were discussing the weather. "So you're looking at potential jail time, not just a civil lawsuit." The silence stretched long enough that I wondered if she'd hung up. Finally, her voice came back, smaller and much less confident. "You can't prove I stole anything. Marcus gave me access to those files voluntarily." "Ah, so you admit Marcus gave you confidential client information without authorization. That's conspiracy and corporate espionage. See how this gets worse for both of you." I smiled at Sarah, who was staring at me with what looked like awe and terror. "Lily, sweetheart, you picked the wrong woman to try to destroy." I hung up before she could respond and immediately called Rebecca back. "I just had a very interesting conversation with Miss Morrison. She's admitted that Marcus gave her confidential client files. I assume that strengthens our case considerably. Alex, if you recorded that conversation—" "California is a 2-party consent state, so no recording. But I'm sure you can use her admission in other ways." I paused, considering my next move. "Rebecca, I want you to do something else for me. I want you to contact the ethics board at Goldman Sachs. Marcus's actions constitute a serious breach of professional conduct." "You want to go after his career too?" "I want him to understand that actions have consequences. Real, permanent consequences." After I hung up, Sarah and I ate in comfortable silence while the sun set over the city. My phone continued buzzing sporadically, but I ignored it completely. Each unanswered call was a small victory, a reminder that I was no longer available for their drama. Around 9 p.m. there was a knock on my door. Sarah and I looked at each other. "Please tell me you didn't give Marcus this address," she said. "Marcus doesn't even know this building exists." I checked the security monitor and saw a familiar face, David Martinez, looking slightly uncomfortable in the elegant lobby. "David? What are you doing here?" "Alex, I'm sorry to bother you at home, but I needed to talk to you immediately. Can I come up?" Something in his voice made me buzz him up without question. David had known me for 4 years and he'd never shown up at my home unannounced. When he stepped out of the elevator, he was carrying a manila folder and wearing the expression of someone delivering bad news. Alex, I owe you an apology. And an explanation. He handed me the folder. After our conversation yesterday, I had my legal team do some digging into Bloom Digital. What we found, well, you need to see this. I opened the folder and found myself staring at a comprehensive background report on Lily Morrison. Except according to this, Lily Morrison didn't exist until 18 months ago. Her real name is Rebecca Walsh, David continued. She's done this before. 3 times actually. Different cities, different identities, but the same pattern. She targets successful men in finance, gains access to their networks and confidential information, then uses it to launch competing businesses. Sarah peered over my shoulder at the documents. Holy shit. She's a professional con artist. It gets worse, David said grimly. Her previous targets, 2 of them lost their licenses. 1 declared bankruptcy. And in every case she disappeared before the legal consequences caught up with her. I sank onto my new sofa, staring at the photographs of Lily or Rebecca, with different hair colors and different names, but the same doe-eyed expression that had fooled Marcus completely. David, I said slowly, does Marcus know about this? I don't think so. According to this report, she's very good at making herself look like an innocent victim when things go wrong. I looked up at him and for the first time since this whole mess started I felt something other than anger. I felt sorry for Marcus. He hadn't just betrayed me for another woman. He'd been played by a professional. But that didn't change anything. He'd still chosen to give my confidential information to someone else. He'd still prioritized her sob story over his loyalty to me. David, I need you to do me one more favor. Anything. I need you to make sure Marcus sees this report. Tonight. David left my penthouse at 10:15 with explicit instructions to deliver the folder to Marcus immediately, no matter what state he found him in. I gave him Marcus's home address, office address, and his favorite late-night coffee shop, because men in crisis were predictable creatures. Are you sure about this? David had asked at the elevator. Once he knows what Lily really is, he's going to realize how badly he's screwed up. He'll come crawling back. That's exactly what I'm counting on, I'd replied. I want him to understand the full scope of his stupidity before I finish destroying him. Sarah had looked at me like I'd grown a second head. Alex, I thought you wanted revenge. Why are you helping him figure out he's been conned? Because, I'd said, settling back onto my new sofa with a glass of wine, the best revenge isn't keeping your enemy in the dark. It's making sure they understand exactly how much they've lost, and that it's entirely their own fault. By 11 p.m. my phone had gone completely silent. The calm before the storm. At 11:47 the calls started again. Not the desperate, confused calls from earlier but something different. Marcus called 6 times in 10 minutes. When I finally answered on the 7th call, his voice was raw. Alex. Oh God, Alex, I am so sorry. I had no idea. She told me her father was dying, that she needed money for his treatment, that she was too proud to ask for help directly. Marcus. I kept my voice level, uninterested. Did David bring you something? The folder? Yes, but Alex, you have to understand, I never would have helped her if I'd known. Known what? That she was a con artist? Or known that she was planning to destroy your fiancé's business? I took a sip of wine and let the silence stretch. Because I'm curious which part you think makes this better. Both. Neither. Alex, please, she played me completely. I was trying to be a good mentor, a good person, and she manipulated everything I told her about your work, about your clients. Marcus, can I ask you something? Anything. Please. When you gave Lily access to my Technova proposal, did you think about asking my permission first? The silence was answer enough. When you started meeting her for breakfast and working late with her, did you mention these meetings to me? More silence. When she asked you about my client strategies and business methods, did it occur to you that maybe your fiancé's confidential information wasn't yours to share? Alex. I'm not finished. My voice stayed calm, but I let just enough ice creep in to make him stop talking. Marcus, Lily being a con artist doesn't change the fundamental problem. You chose to prioritize a stranger's sob story over your loyalty to me. You gave her ammunition to destroy my business, and you did it willingly. But I didn't know she would. You didn't know because you didn't care enough to think it through. You were so flattered by her attention, so eager to play the hero for a damsel in distress, that you never stopped to consider what betraying my trust might cost me. I could hear him crying now, soft broken sounds that should have made me feel something. Instead, I felt nothing but cold satisfaction. Alex, please. Let me fix this. I'll do anything. I'll testify against her. I'll help you rebuild any business you've lost. Marcus, do you know what I did this afternoon while you were figuring out that your girlfriend is a criminal? No. I closed the biggest deal in my company's history. Sterling Marketing just became the exclusive digital strategy partner for Morrison Tech Industries. 3-year contract, 8 figures annually. I paused to let that sink in. Turns out that when you're not distracted by relationship drama, you can accomplish amazing things. The crying stopped. Morrison Tech? But that's one of the biggest accounts on the West Coast. I know. I also poached your 3 best analysts from Goldman Sachs today. Apparently, word is spreading that you've been compromised by corporate espionage, and your colleagues are concerned about their own career security. Alex, what are you doing? I'm doing what you taught me, Marcus. I'm being logical and strategic. I'm protecting my interests and securing my future. I stood and walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out at the city lights below. The difference is I'm doing it without betraying anyone who trusted me. This isn't you. The Alex I know wouldn't be this cold. You're right. The Alex you knew was someone who believed her fiancé would choose her over a stranger. But that Alex doesn't exist anymore. You killed her when you decided Lily's tears were more important than my trust. I could hear him hyperventilating now. Alex, please, I love you. I made a terrible mistake, but I love you more than anything. Marcus, I need you to listen very carefully. Tomorrow morning, my lawyer will serve you with papers for intellectual property theft, breach of fiduciary duty, and conspiracy to commit corporate espionage. Goldman Sachs will receive a formal complaint about your professional conduct. And every major client you've worked with will receive a detailed report about your involvement in a scheme to steal confidential business information. You can't do this to me. My career. Your career was forfeit the moment you chose Lily over me. I'm just making it official. Alex, I'm begging you. Goodbye, Marcus. Oh, and Marcus, when Lily disappears tomorrow morning, and she will disappear because that's what con artists do when their schemes fall apart, don't come looking for me for comfort. You made your choice. I hung up and immediately blocked his number. Sarah had been listening from the kitchen, and she walked over with a bottle of champagne and 2 glasses. That, she said, popping the cork, was the most terrifying thing I've ever witnessed. Remind me never to cross you. I accepted the champagne and clinked my glass against hers. Tomorrow we start phase 2. There's a phase 2? I smiled and took a sip of champagne. Sarah, that was just the warm-up. Phase 2 began at exactly 6 a.m. when my phone rang with a call from Rebecca Martinez. Alex, we have a problem. Or rather, Marcus has a problem, and it's bigger than we anticipated. Her voice carried the tone of someone who'd been up all night reviewing legal documents. I've been digging into the Lily Morrison situation, and there's something you need to know immediately. I was already awake, sitting on my terrace with coffee and watching the sunrise paint the city gold. What did you find? She's gone. Completely vanished. Her apartment is empty, her phone disconnected, and according to building security, she cleared out sometime around 3 a.m. But here's the interesting part. She didn't just disappear. She liquidated everything first. I set down my coffee cup. What do you mean everything? The business accounts for Bloom Digital? The security deposits on her office space? Withdrawn. She even cashed out a joint investment account that she apparently shared with Marcus. Rebecca paused. Alex, she took him for over $200,000. For the first time since this whole mess started, I felt something that wasn't anger or satisfaction. It was genuine surprise. Marcus gave her access to that much money? According to the bank records we've subpoenaed, he co-signed for several business loans and added her as an authorized user on 2 of his credit cards. She's been systematically draining his accounts for weeks. I stood up and walked to the terrace railing, looking down at the city where Marcus was probably just waking up to discover his entire life had imploded overnight. Rebecca, how much legal trouble is he in? Officially, he's still liable for the intellectual property theft and corporate espionage. The fact that he was also being conned doesn't absolve him of giving out confidential information. She paused. Unofficially, the man is financially ruined and professionally destroyed. His career at Goldman Sachs is over, his personal accounts are depleted, and he's about to be the subject of multiple investigations. I closed my eyes and felt something I hadn't expected. A tiny flicker of the person I used to be, the one who would have felt sorry for him. I crushed it immediately. Proceed with all legal action as planned, I said firmly. Being stupid enough to get conned doesn't excuse corporate espionage. Alex, are you sure? The optics of going after someone who's already been victimized. Rebecca, Marcus wasn't victimized. He was greedy and disloyal and it backfired. There's a difference. After I hung up, I called Sarah. Emergency breakfast meeting. My place. Bring those little Danish pastries from the place near your apartment. She arrived 30 minutes later with pastries and the morning business section, which she slapped down on my counter with dramatic flair. Have you seen this? The headline read, Goldman Sachs executive under investigation for corporate espionage. Below it was a surprisingly unflattering photo of Marcus looking disheveled outside his office building. How did they get this story so fast? I asked, genuinely curious. According to my source at the Financial Tribune, someone leaked the story around midnight last night. Someone who had very detailed information about the investigation and Marcus's involvement with a con artist named Rebecca Walsh. I looked at her over my coffee cup. Your source? David Martinez. Apparently, he felt the business community should be warned about potential security breaches. Sarah grinned. Alex, your ex-client just became your most effective ally. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Alex, this is Marcus. Please, I'm begging you to call me. Everything is falling apart. I've lost my job, my accounts are frozen, and I don't know what to do. I know I don't deserve your help, but I have nowhere else to turn. I showed the message to Sarah, who read it and made a disgusted sound. Is he seriously asking you to help him clean up the mess he made by betraying you? Apparently. I deleted the message without responding. Sarah, I need you to do something for me. Anything. I need you to go to Marcus's building and take pictures of whatever you see. Don't interact with him, don't let him see you, just document whatever is happening. She grabbed her purse immediately. Are you expecting something specific? I'm expecting Marcus to do what desperate men always do when their lives fall apart. I want evidence when it happens. While Sarah was gone, I spent the morning doing something that felt surprisingly normal. Running my business. I had 3 client calls, reviewed 2 campaign proposals, and approved the hiring of a new creative director. It was refreshing to remember that I had a life beyond the Marcus drama, and that life was actually going quite well. Sarah returned around noon with her phone full of photos and a look of grim satisfaction. Alex, you're not going to believe this. She pulled up the first photo. Marcus sitting on the steps of his office building with a cardboard box of personal belongings, looking like he'd aged 5 years overnight. They fired him? Not just fired. Escorted out by security while his colleagues watched. But it gets better. She swiped to the next photo. Marcus's BMW being repossessed in the parking garage. His car got towed while he was sitting on the steps. The third photo showed Marcus on his phone, clearly agitated, gesturing wildly while still clutching his pathetic cardboard box. And the best part, Sarah continued, is that he was calling reporters. Trying to give interviews about how he was the real victim here, how his ex-fiancée is destroying his life out of spite. I stared at the photos, watching this man I'd once planned to marry reduced to a bitter, desperate stranger sitting on concrete steps. Sarah, I said quietly, I think it's time for the final phase. Which is? I smiled and reached for my phone. Time to show Marcus what real power looks like. The final phase required precision timing and a touch of theatrical flair that would make Marcus understand exactly how outclassed he'd always been. I started by making a call to the one person whose opinion Marcus valued above almost anyone else's. His mother. Mrs. Chen? This is Alexandra. I hope I'm not calling at a bad time. Alexandra, dear. Her voice carried genuine warmth that made my chest tighten unexpectedly. I've been so worried about you. Marcus won't tell me what's happening, but I can see he's in trouble. Mrs. Chen, I think you deserve to know the truth. I settled onto my sofa and prepared to deliver the most carefully crafted explanation of my life. Marcus gave my confidential business information to another woman so she could start a company to compete against me. She turned out to be a con artist who stole his money and disappeared. The silence on the other end stretched so long I wondered if the call had dropped. Mrs. Chen. Alexandra. Her voice had gone ice cold. Are you telling me that my son betrayed you professionally and personally for a woman who robbed him? I'm afraid so. And now he's lost his job and his reputation? Yes, ma'am. Another pause. Good. He deserves everything that's happening to him. The fierce conviction in her voice surprised me. Alexandra, I owe you an apology. I raised him better than this. Mrs. Chen, you don't need to. Yes, I do. Marcus made his choices and now he needs to live with the consequences. You were the best thing that ever happened to him and he threw you away for what? A pretty face and a sob story. She sighed heavily. I hope you know that not all of us share his poor judgment. After hanging up with Mrs. Chen, I made my second strategic call. Jonathan? It's Alex Sterling. I have a proposition for you. Jonathan Webb was Marcus's former business partner at Goldman Sachs, a man who'd been quietly distancing himself from Marcus since the investigation began. He was also someone I'd met numerous times at company events, and who'd always been exceptionally professional and respectful. Alex, I'm so sorry about everything that's happened. The whole office is shocked. Thank you, Jonathan. Actually, I'm calling about a business opportunity. I understand you're starting your own investment firm. Well, yes, but it's still in the planning stages. I'd like to discuss becoming your first major client. Sterling Marketing is looking for new investment partners, and frankly, I prefer working with people who understand the value of integrity. The pause that followed was pregnant with possibility. Alex, that would be incredible. But I have to ask, given the situation with Marcus. Jonathan, you're not responsible for Marcus's choices. And I've learned that the best way to move forward is to surround myself with people who share my values. I let that sink in. Should we schedule a meeting for next week? Absolutely. And Alex, thank you for giving me this opportunity. Phase 3 required a more public approach. I called David Martinez back. David, remember how you mentioned that the Morrison Tech account was going to be featured in Forbes next month? Of course. They want to do a profile on innovative marketing partnerships. I'd like to suggest they include a sidebar about corporate security and the importance of protecting confidential information. Perhaps a case study about recent incidents of industrial espionage. David's laugh was warm with understanding. I think they'd be very interested in that angle, especially if it came with specific examples of how businesses can protect themselves. Perfect. I'll have my PR team coordinate with their writers. By 3 p.m. I was ready for the final move. I called Marcus from my office landline, a number he wouldn't recognize. Marcus Chen speaking. His voice sounded hollow, defeated. Hello, Marcus. It's Alex. Alex. Thank God. I've been trying to reach you all day. I know you have every right to be angry, but please, can we just talk? Actually, Marcus, that's why I'm calling. I think we should meet. The hope that flooded his voice was almost painful to hear. Really? Yes, absolutely. Where? I can come anywhere you want. Tonight. 7 p.m. The rooftop bar at the Meridian Hotel. The Meridian? But that's where you proposed. Yes, I know. I thought it would be fitting. Alex, does this mean, are you willing to consider? I'm willing to have a conversation, Marcus. That's all I'm promising. I hung up before he could ask more questions and immediately called Sarah. Phase 4 begins tonight. I need you to be my backup. What exactly am I backing you up for? I'm going to give Marcus exactly what he's been begging for. One final conversation. And then I'm going to show him what it looks like when someone really disappears. At 6:30, I stood in front of my bedroom mirror, adjusting the black designer dress I'd chosen specifically for this occasion. It was the same dress I'd worn to Marcus's company Christmas party 2 years ago, the night he'd first told me he loved me. Tonight it would be the dress I wore when I said goodbye to him forever. Sarah arrived to drive me, taking one look at my outfit and shaking her head. Alex, you look incredible but also terrifying. That man is going to take one look at you and realize exactly what he lost. That's the point, I replied, checking my lipstick one last time. Marcus needs to understand that this isn't about forgiveness or second chances. This is about closure. My closure. As we drove toward the hotel, I felt something I hadn't experienced in weeks. Peace. Not the cold satisfaction of revenge, but genuine tranquility. Tonight would end this chapter of my life completely, and tomorrow I could start writing a new one. Are you nervous? Sarah asked as we pulled up to the valet. I stepped out of the car and smoothed my dress, looking up at the hotel where Marcus was probably already waiting, probably rehearsing desperate apologies and promises he'd never be able to keep. No, I said simply. I'm ready. Retry. Claude can make mistakes. Please double-check responses. The elevator to the rooftop bar felt like ascending to a throne room. I'd chosen the Meridian deliberately, not just because Marcus had proposed here, but because this was where he'd made promises about building a life together, about being worthy of my trust. Tonight, in the same place where he'd sworn to love and protect me, I would show him exactly what those broken promises had cost him. Marcus was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table with a perfect view of the city skyline. He'd cleaned himself up, fresh haircut, expensive suit, the kind of desperate grooming that screamed, "Please take me back." He stood when he saw me, his face cycling through relief, hope, and something that looked dangerously close to worship. Alex. You look. He gestured helplessly. You look incredible. I sat down across from him without waiting for him to pull out my chair, a small power move that made him flinch slightly. Hello, Marcus. He settled back into his seat, his hands fidgeting with his water glass. Thank you for coming. I wasn't sure you would. I almost didn't. I accepted a menu from the hovering waiter but didn't open it. Champagne, please. The Dom Perignon 2010. Marcus's eyes widened slightly at the price point, and I realized with dark amusement that he probably couldn't afford to split a bottle that expensive anymore. Make that 2 glasses, he told the waiter quickly, trying to salvage some dignity. When we were alone again, he leaned forward with the intensity of a man fighting for his life. Alex, I need you to know how sorry I am. Not just about Lily, not just about the business information, but about everything. About not seeing what she really was, about not protecting you the way I should have. I studied his face while he spoke. The man across from me looked exhausted, aged, diminished. This was the person I'd planned to marry, the one I'd imagined growing old with. Now he seemed like a stranger wearing Marcus's face. Marcus, can I ask you something? Anything. When did you first realize that Lily wasn't who she claimed to be? He ran a hand through his hair, the gesture achingly familiar. When David brought me that folder. When I saw all the evidence of what she'd done to other people, how she'd played this exact same con before. His voice cracked slightly. Alex, I was so stupid. I thought I was helping someone in need, but I was just flattered that someone needed me that much. And that's what bothers you most. That you were fooled. No. He leaned forward urgently. What bothers me most is that I hurt you. That I broke your trust for someone who never deserved mine. That I lost the most important person in my life because I was too arrogant to see what was right in front of me. The champagne arrived and I took a sip while considering my response. The bubbles felt celebratory, though not for the reasons Marcus might hope. Marcus, do you know what I've been doing for the past week while your life fell apart? He shook his head, looking almost afraid to hear the answer. I closed the Morrison Tech deal, which will add 8 figures to my annual revenue. I hired 3 new senior executives, including 2 of your former colleagues who specifically asked to work for me instead of staying at Goldman Sachs. I took another sip of champagne. I also got engaged. The color drained from his face so completely that for a moment I thought he might faint. Engaged. I held up my left hand, showing him the stunning emerald-cut diamond that caught the light like captured fire. His name is Dr. James Morrison. He's a trauma surgeon at Cedars-Sinai, and coincidentally he's the brother of Morrison Tech CEO. Marcus stared at the ring like it was a weapon pointed at his heart. How long? When did you? We met at the Morrison Tech negotiations. He asked me to dinner the same night I found out about your betrayal with Lily. I smiled at the memory, and for the first time all evening the expression was genuine. It's amazing how much clearer your priorities become when you stop wasting energy on people who don't deserve it. Alex, please. You can't marry someone you've known for a week. This is just revenge. Marcus. My voice cut through his desperation like ice. This isn't revenge. Revenge would be if I'd married James to hurt you. This is just me moving on with someone who actually values what I bring to a relationship. He was crying now, silent tears that he didn't seem to realize were falling. Alex, I love you. I know I don't deserve another chance, but I love you more than I've ever loved anything. I know you do, I said gently, and I meant it. But Marcus, love isn't enough when there's no trust. And there will never be trust between us again. There could be. I could earn it back. No. The finality in my voice made him stop talking. Marcus, you had my trust for 3 years. Complete, absolute trust. And you traded it away for a stranger's sob story. That's not a mistake someone makes once. It's a fundamental character flaw. I stood up, leaving my champagne barely touched. I want you to stay here for exactly 10 minutes after I leave. Don't follow me, don't call me, don't try to contact me through friends or family. Alex, wait. If you do try to contact me, my lawyers will file for a restraining order. If you approach James or try to interfere with my relationship, I'll make sure the criminal charges against you stick. I picked up my purse and looked down at him one final time. Goodbye, Marcus. I genuinely hope you learn from this and become a better person. Just do it far away from me. I walked away without looking back, but I could hear him sobbing behind me. As the elevator doors closed, I felt the last connection to my old life snap cleanly in two. Outside, Sarah was waiting with the car running and a bottle of champagne on ice. How did it go? I slid into the passenger seat and held up my left hand, letting the engagement ring catch the streetlight. James proposed this afternoon. I said yes. Holy shit. When were you going to tell me you had a boyfriend, let alone a fiancé? I laughed, feeling lighter than I had in months. Sarah, sometimes the best revenge isn't destroying your enemy. Sometimes it's becoming so happy that they become completely irrelevant. As we drove away from the hotel, away from Marcus and everything he represented, I felt something I'd almost forgotten. Excitement for the future. Behind us, Marcus was probably still sitting at that table, surrounded by the ghosts of promises he'd broken. But ahead of us was a life I'd built entirely on my own terms, with a man who saw my strength as something to celebrate rather than something to exploit. I'd won. But more importantly, I'd learned something invaluable. Alexandra Sterling didn't need anyone's validation to be complete. I was enough all by myself. Everything else was just bonus.